Hello again, everyone. This is Gilmer, and you are looking live. Well, not really video of Revolution Under Siege. I wish I could turn the music on. They got a lot of period centric songs from Russia. Uh, very stirring music. If you were to ever buy it, you could listen to the music. I wish I could play it for you, but then I get these copyright strikes against me, and it really doesn't matter. I don't think they're going to do anything to me because I'm not trying to make any money off of these. But anyway, I'm going to turn the sound off anyway because I'll get spammed with emails telling me I'm getting copyright strikes against me, or they're filing a copyright strike against me, or however they do it. But as you can see, Revolution Under Siege, Russian Civil War, 1917 through 1923. So this basically occurs after World War One. I know World War One went to 1918, but Russia and eventually the Soviet Union, they dropped out of World War One in 1917, and then of course they had their own issues during this time period. Several different groups were trying to gain control of Russia. It was eventually taken over by the faction that's going to be called the Reds, which is the Soviets or the communists. They had some nationalists that were trying to take over the nation, and then also they had another faction that I can't really remember, but it wasn't as cut and dried as I used to think. I used to think, as soon as they dropped out, they became the Soviet Union. The Reds took over, but it wasn't quite that case. They actually had to fight for control of the Soviet Union or Russia, and of course, at that time, when they captured the Tsar's family, they killed the family. Um, yeah, it's kind of like what happens a lot of times. The French did the same thing with their monarch when they had a revolution. They killed the monarch and his family, and the French killed a lot of nobles or dukes or aristocracy, and in Russia, a lot of people were killed as well, especially the ruling family and probably a lot of the aristocracy there as well. I don't know as that much about it. I do know that the Romanovs were murdered by the people that took over Russia. So anyway, I wanted to do a small scenario of Revolution Under Siege, and I apologize for not putting out a video yesterday. I was not feeling well. I'm still a little under the weather. It's not the coronavirus or anything like that, but it kind of almost, it's not completely debilitating. It just keeps me from recording because I'm not feeling well at the time. So let's take a look at some of this, kind of like what I did with the Bloody Shiloh scenario and American Civil War II. If you take a look at options, as you can see, I've got music turned off, sounds are on, language is English, of course, pause after battle. And what that does is it brings up the battle report, and you can look at the battle report before the turn keeps processing. I actually have battle animation on high, which it's really, you know, like I probably described before, a little graphic icon comes up and it shows the relative balances of forces and who's doing better, how many troops each side has, what type of units are being committed to the battle, that type of thing. The assault phase, the phase where they're just firing their weapons. Sometimes I think the assault phase is basically when one side charges the other with bayonets or swords or whatever they have. The cavalry charges. Let's see. Sounds are on. I said that already. Regroup armies. It's that's such a minor thing. All it does is it just stacks them one on top of each other, so you just see one, as opposed to having several armies viewable in one region. Because if you have like three armies in one region, it'll show all three if it doesn't regroup. If it does regroup, you will just see the one, and then you can spread them out again. So it doesn't mean anything. Tooltip delay. Um, the amount of time before the tooltip box will appear over an item. I have it to none because that's why. As soon as I mouse over it, I want to see the tooltip. Focus on move. Choose for how long the map must focus on the region where a unit arrives. No focus, low delay, medium delay, high delay. I kind of like that. Game. Use fog of war. Yes. Delayed commitment, a small delay, and that is just if I can't remember if the turns are 30 days long or 15 days long, but basically, if your army moves into a region and you have an opposing army and you are going to battle, delayed commitment means they'll wait a couple of days and get kind of battle ready before they actually attack. Naval box handling. Don't really like. I've never really liked the naval boxes. I'm just going to put that on complete control by the AI, which gives us 50% of effectiveness. I just don't really. I've never really enjoyed the naval boxes or thought they were really that important to the game, but I could be wrong. And if you change my mind, you might change my mind by commenting and telling me I should worry about it. So change my mind, and I'll think about changing this. Extended pool. I'm playing with historical allowance and recruitable military units. We've gone over that before. If you put plus 50%, that means you can build more units than were historically ever built. And as you can see, the game design team has not calibrated the game for such a setting, so ahistorical gameplay can result from the choice. If you do that, that's 100%, that's 200%. I'm going with historical. Historical attrition, I'm just going to do, you don't lose men from desertion and sickness if they're not moving. I think I always felt like that was a little bit more historical. I mean, if you're sitting in camp outside a city and the city's supplying you with units and you're not moving, you're not going to have as much. You're not going to have that much attrition, if you ask me. There might be some, obviously, because this is a time of the world where we didn't have antibiotics and things like that. But I still kind of don't like this full attrition where it says historical, because I don't know that you're relying on the programmers that they know what historical attrition is. And I'm not trying to insult them, but I think it's a slightly off. Randomized generals, no, I don't want, good generals randomized to being bad generals, historical good generals. I don't want them to be crappy generals, and historically horrible generals, I don't want them to be good generals. That to me kind of will be an ahistorical kind of thing as well. Activation rule. If selected, land forces will have a large movement and combat penalty if the stat commander is not activated. We've talked about that before. Every turn your commander goes through a status check of whether he's active or inactive. Inactive kind of means if the general is he's not very well organized and can't get his troops moving the way another more organized commander might do. So if you think of American Civil War, if you're familiar with the generals in there, General Grant, the commander, the overall commander of the Union Army, he had he was very organized. He's considered somebody that had a rating that where he had a high rate, and so he was almost all the time active, and so he could move quicker. Then you'd have somebody like a McClellan, who historically was bad at getting his armies moved and moving them around. Uh, Lincoln historically said, "If you're not going to use my army, can you let me use it?" or something along those lines, because he got frustrated with McClellan's inaction. And that's not to insult McClellan. He was a very good general. He did have some issues about getting, moving to where he wanted to do something, and the sense of he didn't have an urgency that some generals have, but he was still good at organization, training, and those types of things. So anyway, AI, activate AI. Obviously, if you don't have it active, then it's basically just punching somebody who doesn't have his arms up. You have to have that. You have to activate the AI for it to do anything. AI ranking current difficulty level as sergeant. That's the level I had the difficulty level on in American Civil War 2, and I lost. I also had it at that level, I think, in Wars of Succession. On the smaller scenario, I won that scenario by points. I didn't win it decisively, so sergeant level is pretty good. It says can be challenging, although players with some experience of the game should be able to win over them without too much difficulty. I've mentioned this before, and I mean I've talked directly, basically, to the experts on the Ajad forums. When the smaller scenarios are not designed for you necessarily to win those scenarios, they're more designed for you to learn the system. And it's I've been told point blank that those smaller scenarios are much harder to beat than the larger scenarios, in the sense that if you know the game. So a real experienced player can still lose these small scenarios, but a real experienced player is probably going to beat the game, the AI, on the full campaign, the full game, the full war, that type of thing. Use all behaviors. If disabled, some AI behaviors will be disabled, lower AI performance, but higher turn processing speed. It is recommended to check this box for the best game experience. So basically, that just means the AI fights better if this is checked. Activation bonus +1. It's normal. It just, going back to generals being activated or not being activated, this gives them a +1, and this is the AI. So the AI gets a +1 activation bonus, so their generals will, if that general has a medium strategic rating, they will activate more than they won't activate. AI detection bonus, that's a +1, and AI detect bonus basically means, well, this setting gives a bonus in detection points for AI. The options are no bonus, low bonus, medium bonus, high bonus, very high bonus. For the best game experience, it is recommended to play with a low bonus for the AI. And what this means is, under fog of war, you can't see what the AI is doing, and the AI can't see what you're doing unless you perform reconnaissance and spot them. And so a +1 bonus gives them a little bonus in spotting my units and determining where my units are and what they're doing. Aggressiveness, normal. Normal aggressiveness has optimized behavior. Give AI more time. Allow the AI to spend more time calculating its turn. 25% slower processing. 10% increased performance on average, which means the AI will do better. It's kind of like a chess. If you're playing chess against a computer, if you give it more time, it's going to play a lot better because it's thinking through all the different permutations or whatever you would call it of the different moves, and that's basically what you're doing here as well. System, there's really not anything here that I really need to go over. No winter map. I want the winter map, and I have a computer that will do it. CPU sleep mode, max texture size, blah blah blah. Not really anything of that you really care to look at. I mean, if you play the game, this comes in more to your needing to take a look at it. Error logging sends files to the development team. I don't think that anybody is really patching this game anymore, so it doesn't matter. But you can put that on, and it'll send it to some Dropbox emails, somewhere that somebody might be still looking at. CPU sleep mode. If the game's minimized, the CPU goes to sleep. Or, well, no, the game goes to sleep if it's not the active application. Textures initialized allows the game to load all region textures during game initialization. That helps you scroll across the map. Smaller fonts. If you have real good eyesight, you can do smaller fonts, but my eyesight's not as good as it was about 4 years ago, so 4 or 5 years ago, so I have the larger fonts. It just makes the writing bigger, like options and replay, update, quit. That might be in a smaller font, so it's I like it in the larger font. No winter map. If you select this, it won't show the regions that are under snow conditions, that type of thing. Memory usage. You are allowing the game to use 75% of your physical memory for its internal caching purposes. I think this might be more for saving the game, and also honestly, I'm not too positive about that, to be honest. Max texture size. This setting allows the game to run in a safer mode if the video card has trouble unloading and reloading large textures more than 1024 pixels wide. The settings are small textures, medium textures, large textures, very large textures, default. Running in a safer mode will disable the largest region images, oceans and such. So, if check borders will be drawn between the regions controlled by different factions, can slow down scrolling. I don't have much trouble with that. Is there anything else? I don't think so. There's usually a screen that says script, if you're modding the game, but I don't see it on this one. So I'm going to close that. You have your new game, continue game, load game, save game. If you're playing a game, you can save it, and then when you load up, you can just say continue the game, and it'll be the very last game you played. Update. I'm playing on the Steam version, and sometimes the Steam version doesn't have beta updates. You can opt into them, but I don't think Azod's very good at getting beta patches to Steam. And because they're a very small company, and I'm not insulting them or criticizing for that, it just seems like they're like getting into it and patching doing a beta patch, and they put it on the forums and say, take a look at this. And I don't think it gets distributed out to Steam. Replay the previous turn. This is for if you're playing by email against another human, you can replay the turn, because both of them, one of the players has to process the turn, and the other guy doesn't get to see anything. So when he gets the files back from the guy that processed the turn, he can click replay, and it'll show the previous turn, the way it fell out, the way it processed. So quit. That's quite obvious. Credits. Powered by Delphi, powered by Omega. really know, but all of those. But let's take a look at the scenarios. Tutorial 1, user interface and movement orders. So they do have tutorials if you want to play those tutorials. Tutorial 2, command chain. This explains, the generals, how they get promoted, the command points that they bring to their command, that type of thing. Tutorial 3, attacking the enemy. Ice March, scenario 1917. 14 turns. The Bolsheviks. Let's cancel that. So I'll just leave it on that. The Bolsheviks have just taken power in Moscow, and only some Don Cossacks in the little volunteer army oppose them in the south. The Red Army is asked to annihilate them, and they will simply try to survive until June 1918 revolts bring them new hope. The Whites' objective is to survive and to hold at least one strategic city near the Don or in the Kuban until June 1918. The Reds' objective is to destroy the White Army by holding all strategic cities from April 18th. So the Bolsheviks are the Reds, or the Soviets. The Whites are the Nationalists slash other nations, maybe. The ones that are still loyal to the monarchy, I believe. So that's the breakdown of the combatants there. White Autumn, 76 turns. That's a pretty long campaign. Looks like a lot of people are up against the Reds. Red Spring, that's a short campaign, 64 turns. Finnish Civil War, 17 turns. This is the one I was thinking about doing. The Finnish Reds have an initial superiority, but they will be weakened by the departure of Russian troops. The White Finns will receive important reinforcements from Sweden and from Germany, but they should try to win before the German intervention to avoid Finland to become a puppet state. The Finns' objective is to take all strategic cities before the end of the scenario and without triggering German intervention. The Reds' objective is to hold at least one strategic city until the end of the scenario. So basically, the Finns are having a civil war, and the Nationalists are versus the Communists. And so the Communists are the Reds, and so they're trying to take over Finland as well. And this is kind of the Finnish Civil War. I don't think it was successful for the Communists because Finland is not communist, and I don't think they ever were communist, to be honest. The Polish-Soviet War, 40 turns. Poland tries to take profit of the Civil War to invade Ukraine and to enlarge its eastern borders. In Moscow, Lenin wants to use a war to spread the revolution in Central Europe. So it kind of, I've heard somewhat different explanation of this war, but because I'm Polish descent, I'm kind of biased to the Poles. But I've heard what I've read and heard, and I'm saying it could be wrong, that the Soviets tried to take over basically Poland, and Poland, after World War One, and Poland had to fight basically for its survival after World War One, because after World War One, Poland didn't exist before World War One. In the late 1700s, Poland was partitioned by Austria, Russia, and Prussia, I believe. And they completely dissolved Poland. There was no Poland for 140 years, or 100, however long it was, from 1770 something to 1918, 1917. So the group of nations that were where the victors in World War One basically got together and said, they were partitioned illegally, and we're going to reconstitute Poland. So they reconstituted Poland, and then like I said, I've read. I'm not saying it's true, but I've read that the Soviets tried to subjugate Poland at this time, right after Poland was reconstituted, and Poland had to fight for its independence, and supposedly they won that war just just for survival, and that's why Poland, was a nation between World War One and World War Two, and of course, then the Germans attacked Poland in World War Two. But that's supposedly, under my understanding, that's how Poland stayed a viable state. Dragneck Austin, alternative history campaign. Note that the anarchist greens and whites are not playable. So it looks like it's Germany and all the Central Powers are going after the Soviet Union. And then Revolution Under Siege, the Grand Campaign, 86 turns. This is, if we click on this, let's see. Yeah, see, you can have your choice of 3 different factions. The Reds are the ones historically that won and became, turned it into the Soviet Union. The Western Whites, not really sure. The Eastern Whites, but these were nationalist type factions, is all I wanted to say about that. So if we open up the Finnish scenario, and I'm going to click Finland. And if you look at the map, this is the map. The units that are red obviously are not my units. The units that are light blue are my units. And I'm not going to run any turns today. I just want to take kind of a look at it. So this is 17 turns long. If you show military control, mostly controlled by the nationalist Finns. Supply shows you the supply level of the city. The one on the left is normal supply. The one on the right is ammunition supply. So there's a lot of ammunition and a lot of regular supply here in this city. Can I click on it? I don't know if I can click on it. But that says Vasa, Finland. If I pronounce it wrong, I apologize. And also, I think it shows that these two are considered strategic. Or maybe not. Excuse me. This is a strategic city, Kuopio. And so anyway, every one of these little stars, and then there's one down here, Sortavala, Finland. But you want to take every little city that has a star, and that's a gold star. So if I do this, let's hit F9. So these are your objectives list. The Reds control Helsinki. The Reds control Tampere. We control Vasa. The Reds control Viipuri. The Reds control Kuopio. We control Sortavala. And then Turku. This icon means basically nobody has control. If you capture a city and just put militia, it'll show this icon usually, and that means it's basically up for grabs. Nobody really controls it. You have to put a regular infantry unit, I believe, into these cities for it to say, yes, it's your conquest, you took it over, you own it now. So as you can see, the Finnish Civil War starts in 1918, or it starts in, Yeah, late January of 1918, ends in October, early October of 1918. And so that's 10 months, but it's early October, so that and then of course late January, so that's 2. So it's 17, 18 turns along. That's about right. Uh, Current morale, everything like that. These are the ones we're attacking. Their morale is 100, just like ours is. They have a combat power of 87% of what we have. Here are the strategic cities: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they start with 3 and we start with 3, and we're supposed to hold all of them to win the scenario decisively. Population loyalties: the reds are obviously Soviet loyalists. The light blue is us. The gray area is some kind of mix, I think. This says loyalty Finns 90%, so 10% is probably the Soviet type or the communist loyalty. Show areas. This is basically the state. If you live in the U.S., we have states. These are basically states, I think, but they probably control them and have administration slightly different than the United States. Theaters of operations. This is our theater of operation. I don't think are able to go outside of that. So, weather zones. The weather in this zone will be different sometimes than the weather of this zone. That's really. Show the current weather. Current weather. Deep cold. Deep cold. And this is very high on the longitudinal, latitudinal sphere. It's very high up, closer to the pole, so it's very cold in this area, is what you should take away from that. Anyway, that's going to be really it for this video, this episode. I just wanted to kind of go over it. I might go over other things when I come back next time. You have the F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, F6, F7, F6. Maybe I should do that. So you see war production at the top. F7, F5, diplomatic affairs. F4, home politics. F3, mobilizations. F8, strategic map. F9, the objectives and scores are basically the victory screen to see how well you're doing in the war. F10 will give you a scenario background. And then you have these national morale. You can lose sudden death if your national morale drops below a certain point. You can win sudden death if your national morale gets above a certain point. And actually we should see if it shows it. It doesn't actually show it, so maybe not in this scenario. Maybe in this scenario the sudden death doesn't happen. Probably wouldn't happen anyway. Victory points. This is points you get from owning your objectives. Engagement points. It represents the capacity of political actions of your governmental administration. EPs are gained each term from your objective Cs that you control, listed in the objective screens, F9. They are also gained and lost according to battles, events, or by options. Change per turn +5. Rubles, thousands of rubles. So we have 20,000 rubles. That's the currency that is used in this game. And everything that you can buy, or, like historical decisions or events or whatever that you can actually buy or enact yourself, or recruitment, will be listed in how many rubles it costs. Conscripts, you have to have conscripts to build military units. War supply, you have to have war supply as well when you build military units. They'll give you a cost of, when you build a unit, it'll say X amount of rubles, X amount of conscripts, X amount of war supply. And then you have the railroad transport capacity. If you look closely, we have railroads because it is the 1920s, 19 teens and 20s. So there are railroads. You can use railroads to get around quicker, and your army will not lose as much cohesion when it travels by train. So that's something to think about. Over here, you just have the clock, the current clock. I'm playing this at 5:41 in the afternoon. Back to main menu, save, proceed to next turn, replay previous turn, then the date, and then you have your armies are listed here. So I have one army. It's commanded by this man, Baron Karl Gustav Emil Mannerheim, born June 4th, 1867. Why this is in French, I do not know. But that's pretty interesting. I have this on English settings, so I don't know why it's in French. But Finland officer of the Army, Imperial Army. He commanded the 12th Division of Cavalry with the Austro-Hungary, and was promoted to lieutenant general in 1917. On returning to Finland, he was nominated general of the forces of the Army of Finland in 1918. I know a little bit of French, obviously. I don't know. I'm not fluent in it. I used to be, but I'm not. Then he became the general of the armies of the Nationalists during the Civil War for Finland. I know some of those words. I don't know all of them. I don't want to sit here and act like I can translate that. But if you know French, you can translate it. Anyway, he's our commander. His strategic ratings, I didn't look at that. Let's look at that. His strategic rating, 6, offensive 3, defensive 5. That's a pretty good general. 6 is the highest you can get, I think, at the beginning of any kind of scenario. And I think it can go up. I think I've seen games. I don't know if that's the case in every game, but I'm pretty sure I've seen in games where some of these numbers have actually gone into the 7s. I can't tell you which game that happened, though. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. We actually have a Finley army here with no commander and a Finland army there. If I combine them, that's the Finland army. He's locked, but he will become unlocked, I think, pretty quickly. I think. But anyway, I'm going to save this turn. Even though I haven't really done anything. Oh, and you do get Air Force type units as well. Very primitive type airplanes, but as we all know, airplanes did participate in World War I, and this is just after it, so you will see Air Forces. And that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. I will talk to you next time.